they were assigning men to units that needed additional men.
So they needed additional
No,
men?
it was just a matter of
they grabbed you and said, this is what they want you to do.
Reaching in a hat. So, no, I went overseas with this outfit with no training.
Ready?
Okay.
Ready to go.
Now we're looking for your unusual home tip. If you have one, ship it to me. Put it on a single sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. Send it to me at Home Tips, KTBB, Post Office Box 7935, Tyler, Texas 75711. Could end up on the radio, maybe even end up on their ABC daytime television show Home. 8:20 on the Talk of Tyler Longview, KTBB 73 degrees. What were you doing this morning in 1944 when you heard 150,000 Allied troops had stormed ashore during Operation Overlord? Boy, did they push the Nazis back to Berlin. We've got a gentleman with us who was in the armed services at that particular time and got the coded message. And I guess you could say, outside of the people that were storming the beaches, got the first word that, yes, Operation Overlord was underway. And it is you don't know what an honor it is to have George Carter with us in the studio this morning. George, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Everything going well, I trust?
Yes.
All right, now, how did you get into the service? You volunteer, they draft you, or what happened?
No, they drafted me.
They wanted you, huh? They knew what a good person you were, and they wanted your body. Well, where were you when you got word that they wanted you?
I was in Shreveport.
You were in Shreveport when you got your draft notice.
Right.
And then where did you end up?
First to Camp Walters, then Salt Lake City and Boise, Idaho after that. And when we got to Boise, we were assigned to a unit alerted for overseas duty.
How long did all of this take? It seemed like you're talking about a pretty short period of time.
Well,
here.
from the time I was inducted till I got on the boat, it was 30 days.
30 days?
Right.
They didn't waste any time getting you ready.
They must have thought I was valuable.
What, any basic training?
None. Never did have any basic training.
Yes, he was valuable, all right.
I haven't regretted it.
I bet you didn't. I've talked to some guys who've gone through basic, and they would have loved to have had that. Well, when they started stationing you, did they say, yes, you're going to be in codes, or what did they tell you?
No, that was just more or less a matter of luck that I ended up in code work.
How did you luck out into that? You just in the right place at the right time?
Well, when we got over to the Middle East, we'd been there a couple of months, and 9th Air Force headquarters sent a request to the company out there for 2 men to come in and work in the 9th Air Force headquarters. And when we got in there, we were assigned to work in the code room as login clerks. And then later, the cryptographers there taught us the British system. We use British system in the Middle East.
Yeah, I guess you're not trained in the outside world to be a cryptographer. That's something that...
No, it was something foreign to me.
Nothing you picked up in Shreveport that enabled you to get into this.
No, it had nothing to do with... Well, when I was over there, we had a British officer, and he asked me one day, he said, Carter, what did you do before you joined the forces? And I said, I was in the same business I am now. He said, you were in code work? I said, no, I was in the logging business.
It's like the Army. I've heard of them taking a lot of painters and making them cooks and things like this. Well, where were you stationed when the D-Day invasion came off?
I was at Uxbridge, England, with the 9th Air Force Advanced Headquarters.
Not being familiar with England, how close was that to London?
About 20 miles out of London.
Okay. And I don't know, I've seen The Longest Day so many times. I've enjoyed that movie. And in the first part of it, before the invasion, all of the troops were saying, yes, something is getting ready to happen. Did y'all have a feeling something is getting ready to go down?
Well, the men in the code room knew that it was coming any day through some messages that had been coming through for the last 5 or 6 days, even operating procedures and things of that nature. And when I went off duty on the night of the 5th at midnight, I could see and see some and hear all the planes going over carrying the paratroopers and pulling the gliders.
Well, if you went off duty at midnight and were back on about 6 or 6:30, they didn't let you sleep very much.
Well, that wasn't anything unusual in the Army.
What time did you get back on duty?
Pretty soon after 6:30 in the morning.
And it was just about that time you received the message?
Oh, it was probably around 6:45, I imagine. I hadn't been there more than 10 or 15 minutes.
And of course, they first started hitting the beaches about 6:30. Now, how did you get the message? What did it come in on?
It came in on well, the message was transmitted by radio from the headquarters ship, which was with the invasion force, and transmitted to all units back in England, and it was received by our radio.
And
passed into the code room. We decoded it.
Or it was then typed out in code and put into a machine?
Yes. Well, the radio received it and with a hand. They printed it, hand printed.
Yeah.
If the messages were received on teletype machines, of course, that was printed.
Yeah. So then, instead of going to a code book, this message was put into a machine, and it came out where even I could understand it.
Oh yes. It transcribed it from code groups to plain language.
Do you remember what the message said?
Oh, not exactly, but it was a very short message. Said first Allied troops went ashore at 6:30 in Normandy.
Nice, short, sweet, and to the point.
Yeah.
Do you remember what your feelings were when you said uh-oh or saw that the invasion was underway?
Well, I wasn't surprised, but it was a good feeling to know that we had started.
How long did you stay in the service?
About 3 years.
3 years after that?
No.
3 years in entirety?
Yeah.
Okay, then you went back to where?
Went back to Shreveport.
Oh, you hibernated back to Louisiana, huh?
Well, I didn't stay there long. I came to Texas.
Good, I'm sure glad you did. Well, I guess that would be probably one of the most memorable parts of your military career then, receiving that message.
Well, I guess it was one of the big points, but it was just a day's work.
Just a day's work for you at that particular time.
We were certainly not heroes, the men, Code Marine. The heroes were the men that were looking at the end of a rifle barrel.
Tell you what, from some of the reports I have seen, there was a lot of heroes that day, some that we will never know about. But to all of, to you and to everybody who has served in our armed forces, I want to pat you on the back and thank you for helping us in your way be the nation we are today.
Glad to do it.
George, thank you for visiting with us. And I would like to remind everybody what's coming up at the Carnegie History Center each Thursday this month at 7 p.m. They've got a special program in the Payne Auditorium, and they will explore the impact of World War II on veterans like George and many others, and on people who lived in Smith County. It was early in the war.
Yeah.
Had an uncle that was over there. He flew a bomber for Chenault. Had some interesting conversations with him. What kind of plane did you fly?
I fought in P-40s.
It's a nice handling little machine.
Oh yeah, one actually Chinook. Same time, a little different model.
Yeah.
A little improvement, not much, but although I've flown the others, but not in combat.
Yeah, were you in the service when war broke out?
Oh yeah, I joined 1941, April 41, March of 41.
They drafted you, or you volunteered?
I just went in.
You said, "Here's my body, take me."
I just want to fly. I had no war in mind.
Yeah, what, had you been a pilot before? Had you been flying before?
No, I just decided I want to fly.
What made you decide you want to be a pilot?
I don't know.
It's just like one
I like it, that's all.
And there was no war, I mean, hey.
I don't want to fly, I guess. So I got in. The only time I was ever called a draft notice was about 5 years later. They called me in. I said, "What do you guys call me in for?" I said, "I've just been in 5 years."
Oh, sorry about that.
Sorry about that. So,
where'd you take your basic?
Southeast Training Command in Albany, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, and Selma, Alabama.
And from there over to Australia, or where'd you go from there?
Right, I went to West Palm Beach for about 10 days until they decided to ship us to the West Coast, and out we went by boat to Australia.
Here you come, down under.
Here we come. We're the first outfit, I guess, to get down there after the war started.
You remember your first combat mission?
Yeah. Yeah, you can still see the big zeros and the planes over there. Big, red dots.
Yep. Those meatballs stuck out, didn't they?
They stuck out pretty much.
Well, did you have an encounter on your first mission, or was that?
I can't.
I know you had some.
I probably had some missions before I had any encounters.
Okay.
You don't remember those
Yeah.
too much.
But your first encounter, you do remember.
First one is you do remember. Yeah.
How much of that is instinct and reaction, and how much is training?
That's a good question. A lot of it's training.
Training that becomes instinct.
Instinct, yeah, and I think, well, some guys never did have it. I mean, they just weren't.
Yeah, I mean, there's some people that just not adapted, or
and
just don't.
you had some guys that knew a good way to escape was to fight too. So they never got into too many escapes because one came up for some reason, they had engine trouble, or they just veered away from it, or they didn't go back into it, stuff like that. We all knew who they were in each squadron.
Stuck out like sore thumbs, didn't they?
Yeah.
Do you remember your first kill?
Yeah, I remember all the kills, and the ones I almost got. I think my first kill actually was much earlier, but I didn't get credit for it.
How do they actually credit those to you?
Well, you
Wingman have to see him go down, or?
Well, mainly somebody has to see, or you have to convince enough story that they believe you. I wish I had a gun camera. If I had a gun camera, I'd have more easily.
Yeah. How many did you get?
5 for sure, 5 probably.
That's what you needed.
Yeah.
How many combat missions in all did you fly? Any idea?
138. Now you don't see the enemy every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might be 5 minutes from them, sometimes you don't even see them. Sometimes you hear them over the radio, but that's the furthest closer you get. So you never know when they're going to hit you from the rear, which they did the one time. First thing
That's a single-seater, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Single-seater, about 1,200 horsepower motor in it.
Within 60 days, no programming changes are anticipated.
One of them, I mean, like say, first thing I saw was the bullets off my wing about 3 feet off the edge. My wing's tracers going by.
That'll wake you up in a hurry.
The fourth guy they got, we never did hear him again.
Excuse me, I've got to palaver with him.
With a low in the lower 70s. A light southeasterly wind continuing. Tomorrow, a brief period of morning clouds, then partly cloudy and continued warm. The high in the lower 90s with a south wind at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Our temperature extremes yesterday were 92 and 69. And on Friday, it'll be partly cloudy and warm. Lower 70s to lower 90s.
Temperature in Tyler is 79 degrees under clear skies.
I always like this particular segment, Bill, because I look in there, your nostrils flare, your eyes swap sockets, your ears twitch. When I say, I've got a question for you. Yeah, remember what yesterday's was? You're doing good to remember a Tuesday. No, yesterday's question was about the TV show that most men watch, according to the Nielsen survey. Well, that's a good show. Mission. No, I didn't say that. I would have said Mission Impossible. I like Mission Impossible, but most men said they picked 60 Minutes. Now, women, you're on the right track. According to the Nielsen survey, what show do most women like to watch on the boob tube? I like this decision, folks. Yeah, it's got to be one of these here. The Cosby Show. Cosby Show, according to the Nielsen survey. Next come the Golden Girls. A Different World, Cheers, and Roseanne. Those are the top ones there. I'm glad. Nothing you can do about it. It's 8:12. Good morning, East Texas. Thank you for being with us on the Talk of Tyler Longview, KTBB. Mike Edwards and the morning crew with you. A reminder, we've got Matt Frewer coming up on today's People. You say, who's he? Remember A guy by the name of Max Headroom, that is Max. Well, he's now got his Max Headroom alter ego gone, and he's in a movie, and we'll be talking about Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It's a new movie coming out this week. I want to chat with you a little bit about optometrist. We have a contact lens specialist in Tyler that I have been bragging about very much, and I was talking with a lady yesterday. She said she's going to go by and see Dr. John Magoo. She needs to look into contacts. If that is your case, if you're wearing contacts now, you need a change, or you're getting ready to have to wear glasses, and instead of wanting to make a spectacle of yourself, you're looking at contact lenses, let me encourage you to visit with Dr. John Magoo. He's in the Westwood Shopping Center. Your eye exam, and basically anybody now can wear contact lenses, even people with astigmatism. And besides the popular soft contacts, he's got the tinted ones, you know, one that makes your brown eyes blue, and he's also got the disposable ones, and he's got the best price in town. And you'll like the guy for one thing too. Money on KTBB, and it is a delight to have in the studio. We've been talking, we started here recently with another veteran, talking about some of his military career. And all of this in conjunction with some seminars going on over at the Carnegie History Center every Thursday this month. They've got some special seminars going on over there each evening on Thursday nights about World War II and its impact upon Smith County, upon the veteran, plus on the people who were still here at home. And I've been chatting with a delightful gentleman who I see is going to take this sitting down. Let me welcome Bill Day to the air. Hi, Guy.
Hi.
Delighted to have you here today.
Well, good to be here.
Are you sure about that? You're looking over at Jim like, what did you get me into this?
Not completely.
Let's see.
I can't figure out how you keep going and going without stopping yourself.
It's a perpetual motion machine over here. Now, let's see, what branch of the service? Being an ace, I'm assuming you weren't in the tank corps.
I was in the United States Air Force.
And for how long?
Oh, for about 5 years.
Drafted, volunteered, or
No,
what?
I volunteered, got in about March of 1941.
You walked in and said, take me, I'm yours.
It's about right, and only because I like to fly. I thought I did.
You thought you did. You'd never flown before?
I had my first flight in Philadelphia in 1937, a little biplane.
As a passenger or a pilot?
As a passenger.
Oh, okay.
For $1.
For a whole $1, and that got you hooked, I'll bet you.
That got me going.
Okay, where did you do your basic?
In the Southeast Training Command, Albany, Georgia, Augusta, Georgia. By the way, that's where I met my present wife. And Selma, Alabama.
So you met your first wife there, huh?
Oh, first and only. you got me on that one.
I thought for sure she's going to say, what did he say? She's going to shoot both of us. Now, how long were you over there before they shipped you overseas?
Well, I got through flying school December the 12th, which is 5 days after Pearl Harbor. They changed our orders 3 times on us, as you can well imagine.
Uh-huh.
So we ended up in West Palm Beach, where I spent 10 days. And my wife came down to see me and going to the movie. I fell asleep watching the movie because I was only averaging about 3.5 hours sleep a night because I was out every night doing the town.
Uh-huh.
Enjoying myself before we went to the West Coast.
You knew you were going to have to ship out and you were going to enjoy the... Uh-huh. Sure, I understand that.
So we went to the West Coast by train, which took about 5 days, and we got in Frisco, and there we pick up a boat for, we didn't know where. We didn't know if we were going to Hawaii, China, or Philippines, or Australia, or where. But anyhow, we ended up in Melbourne, Australia, about 28 days later.
Now, is that basically where you saw your tour of duty over in Australia?
Southwest Pacific.
Yeah.
We went from there. Of course, up to this time, I had a total of a half an hour fighter time. And then we went to Canberra, we got our airplane. I flew about 30 hours, and then we got headed north to Darwin, Australia, where we saw the first action.
How long were you overseas?
2.5 years.
How many missions?
138 missions.
Ouch, that's a lot.
There's a few.
Yeah, that is a few. A World War II ace, that means what, 5 plus?
That means 5 confirmed kills.
Confirmed.
That means they're sure you got them.
Either somebody saw them go down or you convinced them they did.
Well, I guess something like that. And I got, like, say, 5 probables.
Yeah.
For some of these probables, you're almost sure you got, but when somebody's shooting at you and you're finished shooting at them, you only have a split second to see them anymore, so forget them. You try to save your own neck.
What kind of plane were you flying?
P-40s,
That's a nice little aircraft, single-seater,
single-seater. It wasn't the fastest, about 300 top speed.
but had pretty good maneuverability.
Nothing compared to Zero.
Oh,
airplane.
no, that
No
particular
plane.
time, Zero, no.
Nobody outmaneuver the Zero.
How in the world can you get a kill on something that can outmaneuver you?
Well, you just dive in and get a shot at them, shoot them down, and then pull away. If you don't get them, go the other direction as fast as you can, then come back when you get far enough away. Don't try to turn with them.
I go say you couldn't turn with them.
No, you couldn't. No, we had a guy try that one day when we didn't know anything about Zeros. A guy named Harris. He was on this guy's tail, and about two circles, the Zeros on his tail. So he finally had to dive out of that one. And he came back and said, "You can't turn with them."
Sound like you learned about Zeros the hard way.
I think so. I never heard of a Zero when I went overseas until I got over there.
Didn't know really what you were up against.
No.
What's it like to be in a dogfight? How can you describe it?
I don't really know. You just a big fight up there. You don't think too much of it. You do what you have to do, and you try to get in there and see if you can get in position to shoot somebody down, and then you're nice and calm. Then when you get back, that's when you get scared if you land and figure out what could have happened.
Yeah. How much of it is training? How much of it is natural instinct? Or how much of it is just reaction to the training you had?
Oh, I think half of it's training and a good bit of instinct and just what you yourself have in you, what you can do and what you can't do.
Did they have some pilots over there that you could tell just were not cut out for this kind of work?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about that. We had pilots that you go up and all of a sudden they come back for engine trouble.
Oh,
And,
all of a sudden it's smoking on them, huh?
Smoking. I can remember one guy that was that way, and today he tells everybody how to do it.
And he
Of course,
gets,
he never got in a fight, though,
and he gets sick. All of a sudden they're not feeling well.
or something like that. Yes.
A variety of excuses.
Of course, I mean, those guys, they come back with no planes to their credit either.
Thought ever cross your mind to get sick?
No, never.
Probably didn't have time to think about it, really.
I think I came back early from 2 missions. 2 had engine trouble 2 times. I actually had it. And my prop was couldn't get the thing proper running right. It was in constant pitch. Couldn't change it. And I forget the other time.
Pretty good career in the Air Force.
Well, I enjoyed my time when I was in. Yes.
You still keep in touch with some of the men you met?
I did until about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was a reunion in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And 8 pilots I flew with in Darwin showed up, which is very unusual.
What was
That
unusual?
many.
You mean that many? That,
Oh, yeah.
that
The
made
other
the
2 I was at, there's only been about 4 of us.
And did that spark your interest in trying to stay in touch, or what?
Well, actually, it was about 4 years ago when I first found out about these organizations. They had reunions.
Yeah.
And they already had 25 for the American Fighter Aces Association. Had 25, and I didn't even know about the first 25. And when I went to that in San Diego, they told me my group had a reunion up in Niagara Falls coming up. I says, "What reunion?" It was their 38th, and I didn't know anything about it. I just got lost touch after I got out of the service.
I can see you sitting there swapping stories now. I bet that was fun, though.
Yeah,
Really over
but the odd part of it, when we go to this reunion, we talk very little about World War II. We talk about everything else.
Why? Don't like to
Oh, we
reflect
already
back
did.
on it? Or
We
you might-
already did that, so we talk something new. This happened since.
I didn't know if it was old hat, boring, you wanted to get
Oh,
on
no,
elsewhere.
not
If it was
more.
just-
Occasionally we might mention a few things, but most of the stuff we talk about the good, pleasant things or what's happened since.
Some don't like to talk about it. They say it brings back too many painful memories.
Yeah, it doesn't bring anything back. Of course, I had it easy.
One question I need to ask before we get out of here, and I've been thinking about this. What movie did you sleep through? He doesn't remember he slept through
That's
it.
a good question. Of course, my wife, who's probably listening to this right now, probably knows the movie, but I don't.
She probably will wring both of our necks.
That
before we
is
finish
right.
with
That
this.
is right.
Bill, thank you for visiting with us and sharing briefly about your military career. And really, as I said recently, my hat's off to you and all of you who have helped protect us and make us what we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bill Day, our special guest here on KTBB. We'll be having some more veterans in the days and weeks ahead, and we encourage you to stay tuned. We've got some fantastic conversations lined up. We may even find out what movie Bill slept through. You never can tell. Tomorrow, Gary Gwynn, who is acting interim chairman, I guess it is, of our local Sister Cities program will be here to talk about that program. And is there a possibility of another sister city in our future? We'll be talking with Gary tomorrow here on KTBB. I'm hungry. I've been here since...
Seems 8 days later. And then went into leave the first 6 days. And I got my first serious wound. I had a bayonet wound, a small one in the fist. They landed behind the line.
Bayonet wound?
Bayonet wound in the grave in a fortified position. My company was selected for that. And this involved a lot.
Who is that, Jim? What's her name?
Including Anzio. We've also got Neil Sperry with Plant Talk Texas, and some problem-solving tips with Rob Weller and crew on our Home Tips feature. All of that dead ahead here on the Talk of Tyler Longview, KTVB. A salute right now to Dean and Linda Pelton. You say, who are they? You'll find them over in Gresham.
And continue to help train recruits in there for their basic training for several months.
All right, now you finally ended up a captain. Where did you go to OCS?
Officer Candidate School, Fort Benning, Georgia.
Okay, where did this come along? Did they say, hey, this boy looks like he's got some talent, let's tap him?
Well, I can't say about the talent, but someone took a shine to me, I'll put it that way.
I think
I did have a company commander who was a West Point graduate.
he saw the talent there. I knew it, sure. And so then you went to officers candidate school. After that, what?
I joined the 3rd Infantry Division in Fort Ord, California. That was busy in amphibious training.
All right, you're over in California, probably looking toward where? Japan, Okinawa, anything over in the west?
Somewhere in the east.
Okay, and then where did you end up?
Ended up in on the east coast of the United States, Camp Pickett, Virginia, and we embarked for the invasion of North Africa.
That's the way it always works. You look one way and the military sends you the other. So you did take part in some of the North Africa activity?
Yes, I was with the 3rd Infantry Division, and we landed at Makata, at Fadela, North Africa, French Morocco.
Okay, what kind of activity did you see around through there, Sicily, Italy, back up into that neck of the woods?
Well, the first part of our tour in North Africa, we were guarding the line of communication between Casablanca and Oran, Algeria. That was the first part of it.
Okay, and then from there?
Later, we took amphibious training in the north part of Africa and prepared for the termination of the war in Tunisia. And we got in on the tail end, I'd say, of that campaign. Enough to get a battle star, but we didn't really earn it.
Hey, that's okay. You got it. Don't look a gift star in the mouth. And then from there, where did you go?
We'd finished amphibious training. We were preparing for the Sicilian invasion, of which we took part in.
That's one that Patton participated in.
That was his command of the 7th Army, and we were part of that 7th Army in the invasion of Sicily.
What kind of activity did you see there?
I was the infantry platoon leader, and we made the assault landing in Sicily. I was one of the first ones ashore, and I recall that very well. And we fought our way in through barbed wire and took out a pillbox, took the high ground, and set tight until the other supporting elements could be landed on the shore.
Now, there's some pretty good fighting in Sicily, if I remember correctly.
It was, and the history reports that there was some paratroopers were shot down accidentally by our own Navy in that operation. We were eyewitnesses to that. That was very disconcerting to see those boys come down. They're even dead in their chutes.
Yeah. Now, isn't this where you got your first Purple Heart?
Well, that was,
where was
on
this?
The north coast of Sicily and behind the lines landing.
What happened there?
Our division was ordered to make 2 end runs to relieve the pressure on the existing front. This was east of Palermo. A place called Santa Gata was the first part, and it was a battalion reinforced, made this landing behind the lines, and it was successful. We took a lot of prisoners. Of course, we lost some men also, but it was a night function altogether, night operation. But it was successful, and since it was successful, General Patton ordered the second one.
Oh, he liked the first one, said, we're going to do it again, huh?
Said, we're going to do it again, and this time it was further behind the lines, about 18 miles to Mount Brolo. We were to go in and sever the highway, of which you recall the Germans were trying to get out of Sicily. They were fighting a delay in action most of the time. But when we landed at Brolo, we did cut the line of communication We landed with tanks and self-propelled artillery, which we took the lower part of the ground and severed the highway and took the high ground, Mount Brolo. In the ensuing fight, by morning, the Germans had already regrouped, and they fought us from two sides then. And we found ourselves surrounded, and they were trying to get their men out. And they were fighting us from one side and then the other side both.
Well, how were you injured?
As we made the landing that night, I came around in the grove of trees. We landed right in a bivouac area of German troops.
Well, that's a good spot to start, yeah.
And there's a guard on one building that I came around, and my sergeant was on my right, and he said, "Fuss dot," and lunged with his rifle and bayonet, and he caught me with the arm. It wasn't a severe wound, but it went through my clothes and my arm. If it had been a little lower, it caught me in the chest.
But that's close action.
Very, very close.
All right, now your other injuries were where? At Anzio?
Anzio, the most severe injury was Anzio, which was, the next one I got was at Osorno in Italy. That was 5 days after we had gone ashore and relieved the 36th Division, who had made the Anzio made the Salerno landing. We went in there, relieved them, and in the mountains of Italy, there at a town called Osorno, I was wounded in both legs with mortar fire.
Now, I've read a lot about the Anzio, and everything I have seen, that was one of the most bloodiest fights, one of the most bloodiest battles of the European theater.
It was, Mike. The largest cemetery in Europe is at Anzio. Our division on Anzio suffered some 6,300 casualties. Now, casualties, of course, doesn't mean all dead.
Yeah.
Dead, wounded, and missed in action, but that's quite a few. And we were there 4 months, and it was really 4 months of hell, and that's what historians call it, hell or Anzio. We were fighting for our very lives. We were on the low ground. The enemy had the Alban Hills, which was to the northwest, and they could look right down our throats. Every person on Anzio was a frontline person. There was no rear echelon on Anzio. People that unloaded boats were under artillery fire and bombing attacks. The nurses, bless their hearts, the hospitals were dug in for their own protection. But it was just a living hell is what it was. That's the best words I know to describe it. 4 months of it, and we had many men who were victims of the disease that got feet too much in water. Because there's times when we couldn't move at daytime. We'd only have to move at night. The Anzio crouch was a term used for most of us because we had to move around in a crouch even in the daytime to seek some sort of cover when they made a movement.
Well, in this 4-month-long activity, where along in here were you injured?
I was injured on the breakout from Anzio very severely in one leg.
What was that, about 2 months, 3 months into
that was
it?
4 months.
4
It was
months
on
right
May the 23rd when we made the breakout toward Rome. I was company commander at that time. I was battlefield promoted on Anzio from first lieutenant to captain and received the Silver Star for that particular action. But on the breakout of Anzio, that was our division suffered 995 casualties in 1 day. Now we talk about our casualties, but the Germans suffered even more because we had the power to break out. We had the firepower on our side. We had the Air Force. So the odds were with us on the breakout. Even though they had the odds, they had more in numbers. We had the firepower, and that made the difference.
I want to ask you about the comment that general made. I found that fascinating. He said if you had cooperated and died, you'd have got the Congressional Medal of Honor.
This was on a different action. We made a company reinforced. We call it a small unit raid upon the enemy position. It was called the Mr. Green operation, and it carried some note in the newspapers following. My company was ordered to make that attack and made the necessary preparations and reconnaissance, even a low-flying airplane reconnaissance, to prepare for it. And we went into this attack. Our part of it was to make the assault after 200 artillery pieces had concentrated their fire in a box barrage on the enemy position. This was the first time that this has ever been in the European theater, and the psychological warfare personnel had a great part in it because they set up loudspeakers on the front line, and a person who was fluent in German language spoke to them and called upon the men to surrender, or they would feel the might of the beachhead artillery. And prior to this, each one of these 200 pieces of artillery had zeroed in this particular area so that they could have a concentrated impact when they began to fire their guns. Overall now, over 5,000 rounds of artillery were fired there in a 45-minute period. But after the Germans were awakened by this intense artillery barrage, and the men had spoken to them in German, encouraging them to surrender or die. And that was the headlines in the papers, that surrender or die attack made on Enfield. But there was none that came forward because their own non-cons were going from foxhole to foxhole, telling them, if you move, we'll shoot you in the back if you make a move to surrender. So at prescribed time, the artillery was lifted, and my company made the attack on the position. And we were especially equipped. I had arranged that we have submachine guns and grenades so that we knew it's going to be close in fighting, and the bayonets were fixed. And we went on the position, and in 20 minutes we had cleaned it up. We had eliminated, I know, 50 men, at least 50 on the position. We brought back 8 prisoners. I had casualties in my company, which I had told them that some of us were going to make it, some of us weren't, prior to this raid. But it was terrific. It was the most horrifying thing when I look back on it that I've ever experienced, was the Mr. Green operation. And my part in it, there's some other details which I won't go into, Mike, but they thought it was a pretty good, what I did was good, somebody did. And they wrote me up for the Medal of Honor because I wasn't wounded on this. The general, when he pinned the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest medal, he said, Stan, it's a pleasure to honor you. If you'd been killed, we'd give you the Congressional Medal.
Paul, thank you so much for visiting with us today. And the reason I wanted him here is to kind of reflect back upon, tomorrow we celebrate our independence. And for people like Paul and many others, we salute you, all of them, for what you have done for us and for helping us become the nation that we are today. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
It's a delight to have him. Now, tomorrow, some special tributes to this country from somebody who can really do it. I'm talking about John Wayne. John Wayne talks about this country, about our flag.
Day of 1941.
Okay.
When the war started. War started in 41, what?
Sure was.
December the 8th. We'd only been there a couple of weeks. We're still living in.
So you're in the Philippines, and then on December 7th, Bluey.
Yeah, that's right. I was in Manila when that happened. Fort McKinley. And we went on frontline duty on the 10th when the other troops moved over there on Christmas Day.
Linda Pelton, Dean Pelton. You'll find them over at McNeil's Grocery in Gresham. They are the latest in the year. Out there. Doesn't it look good? Wait till this afternoon. It's 80 now. We should be up in the upper 90s with a heat index of around 105 to 108. If you have to do any outdoor activities, please take it easy. Home Tips with Rob Weller coming your way next. He'll be taking a look at ceiling fans, about their military activities. Have a fascinating guy with us today. And, well, let me just go ahead and throw his mic open, and we'll say a very good morning to Leon Gray. Hi, Leon.
How you doing?
Fantastic. And you?
Doing fine.
You're looking well. You see what Jim has roped you into, huh?
Yep.
It's the last time you listened to him, isn't it?
I made a loose friendship right here.
All right, Jim. Take a hike. Jim Wilbanks we're talking about.
No, he's a good guy.
Don't say that. Goodness gracious, you heard it. See, what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the old Army Air Corps, which later became the Air Force, United States Air Force.
Did you enlist? They draft you, or what?
I enlisted in September 1940. I was in service about a year before I went overseas.
Okay, so you were in service a year, then you shipped out, where did you head?
Headed for the Philippine Islands.
And you were stationed at, originally?
Originally, well, got in at Barksdale Air Force Base, joined the 27th Bomb Group, went to Savannah, Georgia, and made maneuvers in Louisiana that summer. Went off to school for aircraft mechanics training. Then we got back to Savannah, and they, when we unloaded off the trucks, they said, you're going to the Philippines, so we headed for the Philippines.
All right, where did you head to over there?
We went into Manila. We carried a complete bomb wing with us, the 27th Bomb Wing. arrived in Manila. We were supposed to set up an airfield in one of the southern islands. We didn't have time to do it though.
Why? What happened?
Well, the war started. We got there on Thanksgiving Day, and December the 8th was about 2 weeks later. That's when the Japanese hit us.
Yeah, here you get up there for Thanksgiving, and then all of a sudden you look up at the calendar, it's December 7th, and then here comes
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor.
That's right.
Now, then from Manila, where did they move you? To Bataan?
Well, we stayed on Manila until Christmas Day. After the Japanese hit Nichols Field, I went on a work detail with the Philippine Air Depot to repair some P-40s. And on Christmas Day, Manila was declared an open city, and all the military personnel, the Filipinos and the Americans moved over to Bataan, which is a peninsula similar to Florida.
Now, how long were you there before the Japanese hit in force?
They hit us in force about the middle of January while we was on Bataan. They had been working down through the northern part of the Philippine island there.
What did they throw at you?
Sound like artillery and airplanes. We didn't have any airplanes over there. They got knocked out on December the 8th
Sound
when
like,
they bombed us.
I was gonna say, sound like one of their first attacks, they took care of that, didn't they?
Yeah, they sure did.
All right, then they started hitting you in earnest in January.
Well, that's by ground troops.
Yeah.
Infantry.
Okay, then how long did you hold out?
Okay, we held out on Bataan at our location about until April the 8th.
What was the turning point when they got in behind you?
They got in behind us. We were on the front lines. We were Air Corps, but we formed an Air Corps provisional infantry. And Japanese moved in on our left-hand side and got in behind us with their artillery. So we began to pull back.
And you had to go all the way back, what, to the bay?
Then about December, back to Marvelous Point, which is the southernmost point, kind of like Key West is on Florida. And by that time, General King, our commander, had decided that the best thing to do is surrender the American forces there unconditionally.
Because
That's what
otherwise
happened to us.
they'd have been slaughtered.
Yes, they would have been. Yeah, we would have been.
How many there? How many men there?
I think on Bataan we had about 5,000 Americans. We had complement of about 40,000 Philippine troops over there. That's a very mountainous territory.
Well, I've read some accounts that say that they were very surprised that you could hold out as long as you did.
Well, that's true. That happened. And we kind of saved the Japanese, kept them up there occupied to prevent them going on to southern islands down toward Australia.
Okay, after the surrender, then what happened? Was that when the Bataan March took place?
Well, we got down on Barbados Point, which is about 2 miles from Corregidor, and Corregidor did not surrender when we did. They were surrendered a month later. They formed us in columns of 2, 50 men in a group, put a guard in front of us and a guard behind us, and started marching us up this national highway, which is a gravel road, or a dirt road. And it took us 9 days to get up to San Fernando. And the first prison camp, and they marched us to this prison camp, was at Camp O'Donnell.
Okay, now the trek, the whole 60 miles, hot?
It was hot, dry, it's in summertime, yeah. My feet, when I arrived at San Fernando, my feet were just a solid blister on the bottom. You could stick a toothpick between the skin or your toes.
Well, I understand a lot of the men didn't
And on
make
that, we only had one meal in that 9 days.
I think, is that part of the reason why some of the men didn't make it?
A lot of them did. And water was scarce. They wouldn't let us get water. They had several artesian wells, so it's just a kind of an inhuman treatment, not letting us take care of ourselves. Kept us in line.
Did they kill some prisoners along the route?
They did along the route, yes. You're always running into dead bodies laying off the side of the road.
They either shot or bayoneted?
Yeah, that.
All right, then after the day...
And the odor, the stench was unbearable almost.
All right, then they marched you up to this first prison camp.
It's Camp O'Donnell.
And how long were you there?
I stayed at Camp O'Donnell about 3 weeks. I was on a burial detail. We had about 100 men a day was dying, so we had a burial detail. We'd dig one trench one day, and then the next day they'd fill that one up. In the meantime, we'd be digging another trench, put 100 other bodies in.
Again, is this mainly due to malnutrition?
Malnutrition, the effects of it, yes.
Did everybody have a work detail?
Not there. That was not a work camp. Then they split us into small groups. Like I say, I stayed there 3 weeks and was glad to get out of there. And I went to a work detail at Clark Field, which is an Air Force base there. And they set a prison camp there, about 200 men. Our job there was, funny thing, when they captured us, they asked us what our military duties were. Everybody's either a truck driver or a cook. By that time, we were hungry. So they figured if they were cooks, they'd get in the mess hall. So I got a job at Clark Field as a truck driver. And we were hauling gravel to build a runway. Also, I cut grass. We had grass cutting details. just menial task. But I stayed at Clark Field about 2 years.
What did
in one prison camp.
did the conditions improve there?
Conditions were better on the work details. You got more food.
Okay, you said you were there 2 years. When did they, or where did they move you then?
The American Navy hit the Philippines in the fall of '44, and they moved us by boat up to Formosa. It was 38 days on a little cattle boat. The hole was about the size of 2 basketball courts. They put about 1,200 men down in that hole.
My word.
And it was hot, and then they covered it up.
My word. How long were you in there?
38 days on that one.
Goodness gracious. I would assume there were some that didn't survive that trip.
That's right. We lost about 15 men every night. We used to put a rope around their chest, and we had 4 Americans up on top. We'd pull them up, and they'd bury them at sea.
All right, then you went to Formosa. What about the work? Was there a work detail, or what about the
That was a work detail at Formosa camp. We loaded, had a detail of loading gravel out of a riverbed. 4 men had to load 3 little flat cars, train flat cars of rock before we could quit for the day. That took all day, though.
It would have to.
And so I injured myself. I fell off the little board. It had about a 2x10. That ramp, they would go up to dump our rock into this car, and I fell off it one day and hurt my leg, so they put me on a work detail of cutting grass for some cattle they had. It's probably a pretty good detail, because on that, we were in banana patches, so we could eat all the bananas we wanted. They didn't know that, but we did.
All right, after Formosa, where did they go?
Then I was transferred from Formosa into Japan, and I was put in prison camp at Kawasaki, which is halfway between Tokyo and Yokohama in an industrial area. And there I worked in a chemical factory. They manufactured chlorine gas.
How long were you kept in all? How long were you kept in?
I was 3.5 years as a prisoner, 42 months as a POW.
What was it like when you got out? How did you look? I understand that you were quite emaciated.
I weighed about 90 to 100 pounds. That was the problem there. I developed beriberi, but still had to work on a work detail.
No matter how
I
sick
couldn't
you were.
walk. There was 2 of us that, when they'd marched back to camp, there was 2 of us stragglers that couldn't walk fast enough to keep up the rest of me.
My word.
So my health went haywire.
So,
And my memory went kind of haywire too right in that period.
so then you were.
But that's malnutrition.
Yeah. Then you were transported out to what, hospital ship?
Yeah, we were picked up one afternoon on August the 29th, actually.
How did you find out first that it was over and you would be getting out?
The Japanese, the Emperor Hirohito made a speech on the radio one day about 12 o'clock. And the Japanese had brought their little radio and had it set up, and our guards listening to the radio. We couldn't understand what he was saying. But when he finished speaking, one of the guards came over and said, "Japan patai," Japan dead. Because we had broken English. We talked to each other in just broken one-word syllables. And that's when they told us to surrender. They carried us back to camp, put their guns up, and told our camp commander, there's 200 of us in camp there. If the war was over, we could go what we wanted to. And about 1 day later, the Navy planes started flying over Tokyo, and they spotted our camp. We put a PW on top of the roof and got some white paint painted. And this guy dropped a note, says, and a carton of cigarettes to us. And then they, about every 30 minutes, would get another plane fly over and wave their wings at us and drop some more cigarettes. But the next day, the B-29s came over with 55-gallon drums full of food.
All right, I bet
Dropped that.
That was probably even better.
So we ate about 4 or 5 days before we were liberated.
Yeah.
Good American food and clothes, shoes.
Do you ever stay in contact with any of the men that you served with over there?
Oh yes, we have a 27th Bomb Group that I was with meets once a year. We'll be in Panama City in this fall. But we meet, mainly all of our men are from Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and down in the South. We got 2 or 3 men from Longview that was in our squadron. Got East Texas, Louisiana is about 20 or 30 men, 27th Bomb Group that live in this area. We see them frequently.
Leon, thank you for visiting with us.
Okay.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and our best to you.
Thank you very much.
Take care. That's a delightful guy. I wish I had a lot more time to talk with him. Leon Gray, our special guest on KTBB. Would like to remind you, tomorrow we're going to be talking about another war, the war against crime in Tyler, and about a special night out. In fact, Jeff War will be our special guest to talk about that. And that's tomorrow at 8:20 on KTBB. It's 8:31, time to update. We've had numerous folks from the military that have been on to talk about their previous military careers. And Gene has been standing in here through all of these with a little video camera taping them. And all of a sudden, and Jim Wilbank says, guess what you're going to do today? Is that about the way it happened?
That's the way it happened.
He says, you're on the air, and all of a sudden, from behind the camera to the microphone. Gene, thank you for helping us out today.
You're welcome.
You got to watch out for Wilbanks over here. Now, what branch of the military were you in?
Air Force.
Air Force. And what happened? They draft you, or do you say, here I am, take me, or what?
Well, I already had two brothers in the service, both older than I, and I waited for my draft notice. When it came, I took a physical exam and had the choice of going directly on and getting a choice of branch of service. So I did that.
So it's either let us draft you and go where we put you, or you take a pick.
That was decided.
And so you ended up in Air Force. Now, what about your brothers? Where were they?
Oldest was in the Navy Seabees. He served in several places during the war. And the next one was in the Air Force. He went to, I believe it was the 13th Air Force in China.
All right, now because he was in the Air Force, was that what influenced you to join the Air Force also?
Well, possibly so, but I thought it would be easier in the Air Force. I wouldn't have to walk on my flat feet.
All right, I like honesty on something like that, and you didn't have to walk. What did you do in the Air Force? What was the first assignment?
I started out as a glider maintenance mechanic. Went through training at Shepherd Field.
Now you're gonna have to educate me here. What kind of maintenance does a glider have since it doesn't have a motor?
Well, it is basically an aluminum frame with wooden wings, and the fuselage is covered with fabric. So we had dope and fabric. We had to learn how to do dope and fabric. Had to do hydraulics because they did have brakes when landing on wheels. Of course, you could drop the wheels and use skids, but while on wheels, they had brakes. So we had hydraulics. Cable splicing, it has all the same control system ordinary planes have.
Okay, then you ended up with this glider squadron. Where did they send you?
They sent us to Australia, and we assembled gliders there and started to Port Moresby, New Guinea. But approximately half of the gliders made it there because of the bad weather conditions and turbulence over the water and island.
Now, let me stop there. I remember them using gliders in Europe on numerous occasions. I don't recall any gliders in the Pacific.
Right. They were never used in a campaign, to my knowledge, in the Pacific.
What was the problem?
You just can't land in the jungle.
That makes sense, yeah. You do need a pretty good clearing for one of those things.
Right.
So then what happened?
They used them for some rescue work, but not any invasions.
Well, then what about you? Did you stay on as a glider mechanic?
No, I was reassigned to medical administration.
Whoa, how do you go from a mechanic on a glider to medical administration?
They hand you a pencil.
Okay, that makes, again, a military way of doing things.
And a pack of forms. And you start consolidating records on all of the injuries related to aircraft throughout the whole 5th Air Force.
That covered a chunk of territory.
Yes, it did.
Now, where were you stationed?
First in Port Moresby, New Guinea, after coming up from Australia. We moved a time or two up through New Guinea, and then from island to island all the way to Japan, where I was last stationed.
Now, why did they have to move you up through all of this if you were sitting back in the back pushing pencils and keeping up facts and figures? Sound like you were over in some of the action.
Well, I was a part of the advanced echelon of the 5th Air Force, and the advanced echelon was always as near the front as possible because we tried to keep the aircraft as far forward as possible to save hours, flying hours, and gasoline.
As you look back on that tenure in the Air Force, so what were some of your most memorable moments, or what do you remember the most about that tour of duty?
Well, I would say it was probably the kamikaze attack on our fleet of ships when we went into Leyte Gulf in the Philippines. We had just dropped anchor when the anti-aircraft gun started off, and I was up on the top deck, headed for one of the holds where the vehicles were stored. I was going to take a Jeep over the side, but while I was on the top deck, one of the kamikaze planes picked our ship out to bomb, and he dove straight into it, going down through the hatch into the hole where the vehicles were. So I was fortunate that I had not reached my vehicle at the time.
Boy, Artie, what kind of damage did it do to the ship?
It blew a hole in the side of the ship above the waterline, just barely above the waterline, large enough that we pushed the Jeeps out the side through that hole. The trucks we brought up over the top with cranes and dumped them in the water.
Well, I have seen many pictures of those kamikaze attacks, but that must be an unnerving event to stand there and or wherever you are and sit there and watch those take a dead aim on your ship and say, I don't care what happens, here I come.
It is, but I didn't realize at first that that's what it was. I guess this was the beginning of the kamikaze attacks, because I kept watching the one that had picked us out, thinking he was going to dive bomb, and I was going to jump inside just about the time he released his bomb, but I realized later that he was too close to pull out, so I knew then that we were going to hit.
How long were you in the Air Force?
From February 4 in 43 to December 45, so it was just short of 3 years, and all of that except approximately 3 months were overseas.
Hey, looking back on it, I know it's awfully hard to go back and replay. Would you do it again? Would you have selected the Air Force, or would you have selected another branch?
Well, I think I would have selected Air Force.
Just because of the flat feet?
Well, not necessarily. No, I think there's certain romance about the Air Force that you don't have in, say, infantry. But, both are equally important.
Well, I've got tons of other questions I was going to ask you, and I looked up at the clock, and it says I've got to get out of here because Bill Atkins is sitting in the newsroom, and he's got a news update. Gene, I just want to thank you for what you've done, and first for volunteering or being volunteered to come on the program and talk a little bit about your military background, and for putting up with Jim over here.
Thank you, Mike.
You deserve a big pat on the back.
For putting up with him, I didn't.
You do. Gene, thank you again very much. Gene Miller, our special guest today, and we have been talking to various folks in the military services off and on for the past month and a half, 2 months. We still got some other interviews scheduled in the weeks ahead, and we'll be telling you more about that. Tomorrow, remember back, it's been several weeks ago, there was a young Tyler teenager that we had on the program, Chris Como. We had him just before he got to go to the Soviet Union on a special trip. You go out into the crowd, folks may kind of make faces at you, and then you would be causing wrinkles. We're looking for your unusual home tip. If you have one, please send it to me. Put it on a single sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper, and send it to Home Tips. KT, good morning, East Texas. We have a delightful lady in the studio today we'll be talking with. Thanks to the perseverance of Jim Wilbanks, we have been talking to servicemen off and on for the past couple of months about their tours of duty and some of their thoughts and observations of their military service. We want to do something a little bit different today. We want to take a look at World War II from the home front and what was going on back in Tyler while our servicemen were overseas. And we have with us Mary Jane McNamara. Mary Jane, good morning to you.
Good morning.
A delight to have you here. Now, what were you doing when World War II broke out?
I was in junior college, in Tyler Junior College, when World War II broke out. And when I finished Tyler Junior College, then I began to work at the old Carnegie Public Library.
What was the reaction around Tyler when all of a sudden, here comes the bombing of Pearl Harbor and we really were thrust into this?
There was a great surge of patriotism, a great surge of indignation and anger and patriotism, and many, many men and boys rushed off to join the Army before they were drafted even. And, everyone was indignant and anxious to get out there and clobber those people. How did they have the nerve to do this to us?
Now, what impact did that have upon the school? I guess you probably lost some of the students.
Oh, we did indeed. In the junior college, the boys just cleared out pretty fast. We got down to just girls and just a few boys.
Nearly an all-girls
Right away.
school, huh?
Really, right away. Had just a few boys left, and they drifted away bit by bit, semester by semester.
Now, we had several units that were stationed here. I believe you mentioned earlier that before we went on the air, the Signal Corps was the first group here.
That's right. The Signal Corps was here first. They were trained at the old Tyler Commercial College and lived at the Blackstone Hotel. And they were made very welcome. The town did a lot of things to entertain those, and as young women, we did all we could to entertain them.
What did you do, sing, dance, or put on shows, or what did you do?
We had dances. We had dances at the old City Recreation Center. It was a little group called Military Misses. I think Marjorie Dodd was the main organizer for that, and we had quite a little group who tried to entertain them, do whatever we could to make them welcome here. And my goodness, there were a lot of girls here who married men from the Signal Corps.
Is that right? I
Right.
guess they got the signal.
Right?
Now, Camp Fannin, I guess, came after that then.
Yes, and Camp Fannin, of course, many in the town welcomed it because they could see that this was going to be a great economic advantage. But we soon found out that we were going to be so crowded because the camp was bigger than the town was. And every available space was soon, if you had an extra bed, if you'd sent your son or brother off to the war, right away you rented his bed to somebody who'd come to visit a soldier at Camp Fannin.
Well, it sounds like it got crowded around here.
It did. It was very crowded around here. But it was very bustling and busy, and there was a great deal of patriotism and enthusiasm. I think people even stood rationing better because they could see with their own eyes it was for a very good purpose.
Now, the men that were stationed here, did they come from a certain area of the country? Were they all Southerners or Northerners?
No,
or?
most of them were from the north and the east. And those were accelerated basic training people. They had tested very high in their entrance tests when they were drafted or when they joined the Army, and were going on to advanced, more technical training. So their accelerated basic year was just 11 weeks. And the churches here each adopted a battalion and had recreation centers in the churches for them. Everybody invited them home. We all worked at the USOs. There were 2 USOs. We visited their dances at the camp. It seems to me we danced nearly every night of the week.
Well, what was the reaction to the Southerners down here, to all these Northerners that have invaded the city?
There were a few people who were critical, but many of us thought, well, okay, they're different, but aren't their differences nice?
I bet you learned a little bit about the country, too.
We did indeed. It really made us feel a much more unified country, and we formed friendships that exist to this day. People who still come back to see us, to whom we still write, and I think everyone made friendships that have lasted over the years. They were a great group of people, and their wives came down, and we rented them our bedrooms, and their girlfriends came to visit and lived in our houses while they were here. The USOs had rental service, and when people came in on the bus and came to the USO, whoever was on the rental desk found somebody's bedroom, just phoned around until they found a bed for these wives and mothers and sweethearts to come to visit before their people were sent on for further training.
You mentioned the rationing. What was the biggest difficulty that you saw around the Tyler area during World War II? Was it the overcrowding from the housing, or were there other difficulties that you would rate as high as that?
It seemed to me the overcrowding from the housing was the great thing. Oh, we were a little pinched for rationing. You always ran out of meat before the month was over and you got your new stamps. And you might run out of sugar, but I think people put up with that pretty well.
Now, there may be somebody out there that may not realize how this rationing worked. Why don't you describe that?
We had books of ration stamps, stamps for meat, for shortening, for butter, margarine. We had stamps for sugar. We had stamps for gasoline. And you had books of stamps, and you must pay those stamps out with your purchases at the grocery store. And I heard there were people who hoarded. I heard that there were even grocers here and there who fudged a little bit and let people have something in advance of next month's stamps. But on the whole, I think people were scrupulously earnest. You had a book of ration stamps and you had a book of bond stamps. You were buying your bond stamps every week until you had enough to exchange for a war bond. Everybody was just cluttered up with stamp books.
Now, the rationing, the coupons or the booklet, was that good for a month, or how long were the coupons good for?
The coupons were good month by month.
And if you ran out, that was it.
That was it. That was it. You just ate vegetables.
Now, I've heard there were, certain days like Meatless Tuesdays or whatever it was?
Yes, there were meatless days in order to stretch it and in order just to be patriotic and help the war effort. But one of the things that didn't help the war effort too well was in visiting Camp Fannin, there were prisoners of war there from the African Corps, and those men took the same amount of rations because many of them had been chefs at big hotels and restaurants in Germany before they were drafted. They took what we struggled along with and made the most superb meals out of it. And you kept thinking, I believe they're getting more than their share of rations.
They just knew how to stretch a point, huh?
Indeed they did. Indeed they did.
Well, as you look back on that time, what would be one of the most memorable events that you can recall?
I expect D-Day was the most indelibly marked in all of our minds. I think everybody was awake probably long before dawn on the 6th of June, 44, listening. There were still extras on the newspapers then, and we all listened to the radio constantly. And I think that was the most vivid and outstanding thing that happened to any of us listening for D-Day.
You knew it was getting ready to come, you just didn't know when.
Didn't know when. And it was very, very stirring. All of us had people overseas and were wondering what they were doing. And in their riding home, of course they were not allowed to say, but we could draw inferences.
You
And
read
we
between the lines.
We were ready for it. Even though all our little V-mail letters came with little pieces cut out.
Oh, yes, there was something that they didn't want you to know. Hey, thank you so much for visiting with us. The time has gotten away from me so rapidly, but Mary Jane, I do appreciate it, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come visit.
I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mary Jane McNamara, our special guest today, talking about the war front at home during World War II. Tomorrow, if you look at the calendar, school is getting ready to start. A lot of schools will be starting on Monday the 28th. Tyler school system starts on...
Should I do it?
With someone right now. Can I have him give a call?
We don't want to interfere with him.
Yes, Lord. Okay. Let me...
We're now winding up our series of events on World War II. This has been a rare and wonderful experience for me. I, of course, was in World War II, and all of this has a great deal of special meaning for me. I want to give credit to a man who has over and over gone above and beyond the call of duty, and that's our chief engineer and cameraman, Gene E. Miller. Over and over I called Gene, and at the last moment he has rallied and has put together the program and has been there on time. He is without a doubt one of the driving forces in this World War II program. Another man who has really been outstanding with us is the man named E. Glenn Underwood. Glenn has not only substituted for Gene Miller, and also he has lent us his equipment. Without this equipment, we could not have recorded these events. Other people who have just been outstanding are the participants in these various segments of World War II. They cared enough to come down to the studio and to tell about their personal experiences. All of these stories are living history. I am so pleased that we have been able to record these stories before these men are gone and their stories with them. It's been a rare and wonderful experience for me. Thank you very much.